Hey, what's up everyone? Today's video is going to be similar to the one I made a couple of weeks ago. And that's because I had a comment from one of the viewers asking for a specific scenario. So last time I was using a template when I was merging two files with Power Automate Desktop. But this time we're going to use those two files and that's it. We're going to build our template from scratch. Let's do it. All right, let's get started. So the two files we're going to merge are inventory computers and inventory phones. They are currently on my machine, on my C drive, and I have created a folder which is called VL inventory files. I also have another folder which is VL PAD demo, and in here, this is where we are going to store the final report that we're going to grab to upload into SharePoint. This is basically what we are going to work with. So we have some headers and we're going to grab those headers, and then we have some data. This one is for computers and we have the same format for the phones with obviously different data. So the steps that I have in here, they are from the previous flow, from the previous video that I've created. I've just copied them into that flow. The first action, we are going to set the variable for the final report. Then we're going to set the inventory file location. We grab the current date and time because we want to append the final report with the date and time. And finally, we are converting this date and time into text. Because we are starting from scratch and build our Excel report, we're going to need to launch Excel. We're going to launch Excel with a blank document. We're going to leave the instance visible just for the sake of the video. And the variable that is going to be produced, we're going to change that to final Excel report. Just for good measure, we are going to rename the default sheet. And we want to rename the worksheet from the final Excel report. And let's call that inventory final. Now, to prepare for the loop we are going to go through, we need to grab those files that we have in the folders, the computers and the phones file. So there's an action called get files in folder. We're going to grab this. The folder is going to be our inventory file root path. So we click on the X for the variables. And we have it in here. Just select and click select. We're not going to filter anything. So we leave the star or the wildcard. We don't want to include subfolders. And we're going to change the variable. At this stage, we are going to run the flow. I'm going to save it first, and then we're going to run the flow to see the values of those variables. Going to expand the variable panel. And if we look at the inventory files, we have those two files, the computers and the phones file. We also see that this is a list of files. So the first item will be 0 in the array, and the second item will be 1 in the array. If we pause for a second, we need to think about what we want to do here. Remember, we do not have a template. We need to create that file from scratch. So we need to grab the headers from one of the files, and at the same time, we're going to grab the data. There are just so many ways we can do things. We could grab the headers, copy them in the new file, and then grab the data after. But there's no need to do that. We're going to do everything at once. Let's open Excel again. But this time, we want to open the first file. Now, it doesn't matter if you take the first file, the second, the fifth file, because when we're going to loop through all those files, we are going to exclude the file we are taking now. And the reason is because we are going to grab not only the headers, but we are also going to grab the data. So we do not want to have the data twice. Launch Excel and open the following document. And here we are going to click to get the variable, which is inventory files. This is where our files are. But we don't want to grab all the files. We only want to grab, let's say, the first one. So go into the variable, square bracket, 0 for the array, so item number 1, and the full name. which is one of the properties. And if we scroll down, we're also going to change the variable. And let's call it Excel first file. And we are also going to grab the name of that first file into a variable so we can exclude it in our condition later. Let's call it first file full name. And it's going to be the exact same thing as in here. Inventory files, item number 1, and then full name. Now, to select the range of cell that we want to copy from the file, we're going to need to get the first 3 row and the first 3 column of that file. So let's grab the action and drag it into the canvas. The Excel instance is going to be the first file, and we're going to change the variables. Now, let's copy the cells. The instance again is the Excel first file. We want the value from a range of cells. We're going to start at column A, and the row is going to be 1. So row A1 is the first row which contains the headers. And we want to grab those headers as well, because remember that our final report is currently empty. The end column is going to be the first 3 column, and the end row is the first 3 row. But if we do it like this, then it's going to grab 1 more column and 1 more row than we need. So we need to add the -1 and then click on save. Let's run the flow to see if the columns and the rows are selected properly. Now if I open the files, what I've seen that can happen is that when you open the file, you think that, okay, so the active cell is not the right one and nothing is selected. But actually, if you just expand a little bit the file, as soon as you put it in focus, then you will see what is actually happening. And right now, everything is selected, the headers and the data. So it looks good. And now that we have this data selected and copied, we want to switch into the new file, which is empty, and we want to paste those values. Let's choose paste. The instance is going to be our final report. We want to paste on a specific cell. The column is going to be A, and the row is going to be 1. Let's run the flow again. And if we look at the inventory computers, so everything was selected, and looking at the new file, then we can see it's been pasted properly. So now let's close this. We don't want to save right now. And what we want to do is at this point, we do not need the first file anymore. We're done with that file. We've copied everything from it and put it into our final report. So let's close Excel for that specific file. And that will also save some resources on the machine. We don't need to have this file open anymore. The instance is the first file, and we do not want to save the document. So at this point, we just need to click on Save on this action. Now it's time to look through each of the files that you have in the folder. So we currently have 2. We need to exclude the first file that we just used, but you can have hundreds of files or whatever it is. We still need to look through them. And so we could continue with the flow and write just underneath that. But what we're going to do, we don't create a subflow. And you can give whatever name you want. We're just going to call it for each inventory files except the first one. Let's grab a for each loop. The value to iterate is going to be our inventory files. And the variable is going to be the current item. Again, you can change that if you want. For me, it's okay. So what do we want to do for each file that we have in this folder? The first thing we want to do is exclude the very first file that we used to create our template. So the files where we took the headers and the data. And if we go back into the main flow, we are going to use a condition with the variable that we've set with the name of that file. If I go back into the subflow and I just remove that, we have conditionals, and we want to grab the if condition. The first operand is going to be the current item in the folder. Let's expand the variables, and we have the current item in here. If we expand this, we have full name. And we want to say if the current item full name is not equal, and this is where we are going to put our variable, which is the first file full name, and click on save. So what do we want to do if the current item is not the first file? We want to open that file, and you drag this just below the if statement. We want to open a specific document, and that document is going to be the current item full name. And let's change the variable. We're just going to add file at the end. Then again, we want to get the first 3 row and first 3 column. The instance is the instance file because we are in the loop. And once again, once the file is open, we want to grab the data. And in that case, we do not want the headers. We only want the data. Let's copy the cells from the instance file, a range of cells. The start column is going to be column A. The row is going to be number 2 this time because we do not want the headers. The end column, again, it's going to be the first 3 columns of that file. -1, and the end row is the first 3 rows of that file, -1. After that, we're going to switch to the new file. So let me add a comment. I like to have comments. Switch to the new file. And then here, I'm only going to copy the steps that I had in my previous flow. So I'm going to go through them. Once we switch to the new file, remember we have the headers and some data already. We're going to grab the first 3 rows and the first 3 columns that are available. We're going to paste the cells that we just copied from the file that we are looping through. Then we are sending the down key from the keyboard just to unselect everything. We are getting the first 3 rows and first 3 columns once again to prepare for the next file. And finally, we close that specific file because we don't need it anymore. And now that we have completed the subflow, we need to reference that subflow in our main flow. So let's go back into main. And there's an action called run a subflow. So we insert it just in the main flow at the end. In the menu, you will have all your subflows. We only have one. And now let's try to see if it works. I'm going to save the flow and run it. And then the last 2 actions, again, I've copied them from my overflow. I've made a couple of videos if you want to know more about how to upload a file into SharePoint in detail. But basically, we need to convert the file to binary data and then use the create file action to physically upload the file. So let's save and run the flow one last time. And have a look into SharePoint, refresh. And the file has now been uploaded. Let's open it. And now we have all the data, the columns have been resized, and the worksheet has been renamed. So if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. That will be very much appreciated.